Stop, faltered Dorian Gray. Stop. You bewilder me. I don't know what to say. There is some answer to you, but I cannot find it. Don't speak. Let me think, or rather, let me try not to think. Pause. There's a lot going on here. Lord Henry's panegyric on temptation here, I think, is really important. He's talking about the Hellenic ideal. We see some of our medievalism versus Hellenism. Medievalism very moral, Hellenism very permissive. We get the intellect versus emotions coming out here. But I think the thing that we need to look at here more than anything is the end. He said, we punish ourselves with our refusals. Every impulse we strive to strangle broods in the mind and poisons us. The body sins once and has done with its sin, for action is a mode of purification. The idea here is when you want to do something, there's only one way to get rid of a temptation. And Lord Henry says the only way to get rid of a temptation, quote, is to yield to it. Once you've yielded to it, nothing remains but the recollection of a pleasure, committing the sin, or the luxury of a regret. Interesting word here, luxury. It's sort of used in a paradoxical way. You don't usually use the adjective luxury with the word regret. People don't feel, I guess, grateful that they have regrets, but Lord Henry says, yes, you do. And so, like, to make a metaphor out of this, you see something and it tempts you and you want to get rid of it. It's a bag of Cheetos. You want to eat the bag of Cheetos. Lord Henry says, how do you get over your craving for Cheetos? There's really only one way. You put the Cheetos in a cupboard. Every time you walk by the cupboard, you know the Cheetos are there. You throw the Cheetos out the window, you know the Cheetos are there. You let your dog eat the Cheetos, you're mad at your dog, you're feeling awful because you didn't eat the Cheetos. The only way to not want to eat Cheetos is to eat the Cheetos. I guarantee you at the end of a bag of Cheetos, you're not going to want to eat them anymore. Action is a mode of purification. It gets rid of the desire to do something, says Lord Henry. So the best way to get rid of temptation is to yield to it. What kind of logic is that? I mean, he makes it sound logical. Is it? And of course it affects Dorian. At the end of this, Dorian's like, stop, don't talk to me. For nearly 10 minutes, he stood there, motionless, with parted lips and eyes strangely bright. He was dimly conscious that entirely fresh influences were at work within him. Right? Lord Henry said, don't let yourself get influenced. And now what's happening? Entirely fresh influences are working inside Dorian Gray. Obviously, this is a really important point from a character development standpoint for Dorian Gray. We just introduced him, but clearly something's going on. Yet they seem to him to have come really from himself. The few words that Basil's friend had said to him, words spoken by chance, no doubt, and with willful paradox in them, had touched some secret chord that had never been touched before, but that he felt was now vibrating and throbbing to curious pulses. Music had stirred him like that. Music had troubled him many times, but music was not articulate. It was not a new world, but rather another chaos that it created in us. Words, mere words, how terrible they were. How clear and vivid and cruel. One could not escape from them. And yet what a subtle magic was in them. They seemed to be able to give plastic form to formless things and to have a music of their own, as sweet as that of viol or lute. Mere words. Was there anything so real as words? From an author's standpoint, that's a pretty powerful passage. Yes, there had been things in his boyhood that he had not understood. He understood them now. Life suddenly became fiery colored to him. Interesting choice of color. It seemed to him that he had been walking in fire. Why had he not known it? With his subtle smile, Lord Henry watched him. He knew the precise psychological moment when to say nothing. He felt intensely interested. He was amazed at the sudden impression that his words had produced. And remembering a book that he had read when he was 16, a book which had revealed to him much that he had not known before, he wondered whether Dorian Gray was passing through a similar experience. He had merely shot an arrow into the air. Had it hit the mark? How fascinating the lad was. Let's talk of a book, I think. Sorry, I ate oatmeal for breakfast and there's something hanging out in the back of my throat. It's a benefit of me reading this sort of live and not having editing technology. You get all these little tidbits. So let's talk about this book for a second. Lord Henry was influenced by a book at age 16. It never tells you what the book is. This book, I mean, is it like some weird self-reflective... I don't know. But the power of literature in influencing people and helping them to learn and grow beyond their years, I think, is something that's going on here. And that's something we can talk about. Literature is a form of art. Anyway, how fascinating the lad was. Hallward painted away with that marvelous bold touch of his that had the true refinement and perfect delicacy that in art, at any rate, comes only from strength. He was unconscious of the silence. "Basil, I am tired of standing," cried Dorian Gray suddenly. "I must go out and sit in the garden. The air is stifling here." "My dear fellow, I am so sorry. When I am painting, I can't think of anything else. But you never sat better. You were perfectly still, and I have caught the effect I wanted. The half-parted lips and the bright look in the eyes. I don't know what Harry has been saying to you, but he has certainly made you have the most wonderful expression. I suppose he has been paying you compliments. You mustn't believe a word that he says." "He has certainly not been paying me compliments. Perhaps that is the reason that I don't believe anything he has told me." "You know you believe it all," said Lord Henry, looking at him with his dreamy, languorous eyes. "I will go out in the garden with you. It is horribly hot in the studio. Basil, let us have something iced to drink. Something with strawberries in it." Pause. Your allegory radar should be going off big time right now. We have a Satan figure, we have a God figure. The Satan figure just asked the humanity figure to go out in the garden with him and drink a fruity drink. Yeah. So that just happened. I think that's important. Also, I think it's important to note that Basil is catching something in Dorian Gray that he's never been able to catch before, something in the facial expression. When we talk about the picture of Dorian Gray and how it has all the idealism of romanticism and all the realism of reality, this sort of binary or joint structure that's sort of impossible. He's painted Dorian Gray in perfect youth, but suddenly there's a new expression in his eyes. It's like the moment of understanding, and so it's a combination of perfect innocence and youth with burgeoning knowledge, something going on here, and that makes the painting different. Anyway, I don't want to bore you and talk all day. Let's get back to the story. "Certainly, Harry, just touch the bell. And when Parker comes, I will tell him what you want. I have got to work up this background, so I will join you later on. Don't keep Dorian too long. I have never been in better form for painting than I am today. This is going to be my masterpiece. It is my masterpiece as it stands." Lord Henry went out into the garden and found Dorian Gray burying his face in the great cool lilac blossoms, feverishly drinking in their perfume as if it had been wine. He came close to him. Now, here's sense again, very sensual. The senses are going to be really important because the senses are surface. You can touch, you can taste, you can hear. That's all your body versus your soul, which is sort of the symbolic and the internal. And listen to what Lord Henry has to say to Dorian about sensuality as we go through. Because, again, the medieval times were dealing primarily with souls, what's inside the struggles. Whereas Roman and Greek times, a lot of it has to do with the senses, and you sort of get that Hellenism versus medievalism and the morality things going on, and surface versus symbol. It's all consistent. All right, I'm talking again. I'm sorry. Lord Henry went out in the garden and found Dorian Gray burying his face in the great cool lilac blossoms, feverishly drinking in their perfume as if it had been wine. He came close to him and put his hand upon his shoulder. "You are quite right to do that," he murmured. "Nothing can cure the soul but the senses, just as nothing can cure the senses but the soul." The lad started and drew back. He was bareheaded, and the leaves had tossed his rebellious curls and tangled all their gilded threads. There was a look of fear in his eyes, such as people have when they are suddenly awakened. His finely chiseled nostrils quivered, and some hidden nerve shook the scarlet of his lips and left them trembling. "Yes," continued Lord Henry, "and that is one of the great secrets of life, to cure the soul by means of the senses, and the senses by means of the soul. You are a wonderful creation. You know more than you think. You know, just as you know less than you want to know." Pause. He repeated that twice, so it's got to be important. To cure the soul by means of the senses. When you're heartbroken, it doesn't do you any good to sit in your room and think about the heartbreak. You got to go out and experience life. You got to do things, and that's what's going to cure your heartbreak. So on some level, I think there's a reality to what Lord Henry just said. But to cure the senses by means of the soul, like if you have a damaged hand, are you going to make it grow back by focusing on your soul? I mean, the second half of that just doesn't... Anyway. "You know more than you think you know, just as you know less than you want to know." Dorian Gray frowned and turned his head away. He could not help liking the tall, graceful young man who was standing by him. His romantic, olive-colored face and worn expression interested him. There was something in his low, languid voice that was absolutely fascinating. His cool, white, flower-like hands even had a curious charm. They moved as he spoke like music and seemed to have a language of their own. But he felt afraid of him, and ashamed of being afraid. Why had it been left for a stranger to reveal him to himself? He had known Basil Hallward for months, but the friendship between them had never altered him. Suddenly there had come someone across his life who seemed to have disclosed to him all life's mysteries. And yet, what was there to be afraid of? He was not a schoolboy or a girl. It was absurd to be frightened. "Let us go and sit in the shade," said Lord Henry. "Parker has brought out the drinks, and if you stay any longer in this glare, you will be quite spoiled, and Basil will never paint you again. You really must not allow yourself to become sunburned. It would be unbecoming." "What can it matter?" cried Dorian Gray, laughing, as he sat down on the seat at the end of the garden. "It should matter everything to you, Mr. Gray." "Why?" "Because you have the most marvelous youth, and youth is the one thing worth having." "I don't feel that, Lord Henry." "No, you don't feel it now. Someday, when you're old and wrinkled and ugly, when you thought has seared your forehead with its lines, and passion branded your lips with its hideous fires, you will feel it. You will feel it terribly. Now, wherever you go, you charm the world. Will it always be so? You have a wonderfully beautiful face, Mr. Gray. Don't frown, you have. And beauty is a form of genius, is higher indeed than genius, as it needs no explanation. It is of the great facts of the world, like sunlight or springtime, or the reflection in dark waters of that silver shell we call the moon. It cannot be questioned. It has its divine right of sovereignty. It makes princes of those who have it. You smile. Ha! When you have lost it, you won't smile. People say sometimes that beauty is only superficial. That may be so, but at least it is not so superficial as thought is. To me, beauty is the wonder of wonders. It is only shallow people who do not judge by appearances. The true mystery of the world is the visible, not the invisible. Pause. Lots of paradoxes here, lots of stuff that doesn't make sense. But there is some stuff in here that makes sense, too. He's warning Dorian Gray about getting old and getting ugly, right? He makes some interesting claims, though. Genius is beauty is a form of genius, higher indeed than genius, as it needs no explanation. I think that's interesting. We can all listen to Einstein or Stephen Hawking or lectures from somebody who's a genius, and we're like, wow, I don't understand that at all. They must be a genius. We're putting faith in the idea that they're a genius. They can't even explain their ideas to us. They're so smart. But when somebody super beautiful comes into the room, nobody needs an explanation. We're all just like, wow, you're beautiful. And so on some level, beauty is intelligible and genius is not. So maybe beauty is better than intelligence. I mean, this harkens back to that earlier statement in chapter 1 about knowledge being a bric-a-brac shop that everybody puts too much worth on because they're trying to have something that lasts because beauty fades. And maybe the short duration of beauty makes it more valuable than genius as well because it fades and genius does not necessarily. Anyway, we'll keep going. Yes, Mr. Gray, the gods have been good to you, but what the gods give they quickly take away. You have only a few years in which to live really, perfectly, and fully. When your youth goes, your beauty will go with it. And then you will suddenly discover that there are no triumphs left for you, or have to content yourself with those mean triumphs, that the memory of your past will make more bitter than defeats. Every month as it wanes bring you nearer to something dreadful. Time is jealous of you and wars against your lilies and your roses. You will become sallow and hollow-cheeked and dull-eyed. You will suffer horribly. Ah! Realize your youth while you have it. Don't squander the gold of your days listening to the tedious, trying to improve the hopeless failure, or giving away your life to the ignorant, the common, and the vulgar. These are the sickly aims, the false ideals of our age. Live! Live the wonderful life that is in you. Let nothing be lost upon you. Be always searching for new sensations. Be afraid of nothing. A new hedonism. That is what our century wants. You might be its visible symbol. With your personality, there is nothing you cannot do. The world belongs to you for a season. The moment I met you, I saw that you were quite unconscious of what you really are, of what you really might be. There was so much in you that charmed me that I felt I must tell you something about yourself. I thought how tragic it would be if you were wasted. Pause. All right, so Lord Henry throws his ideals out here for Dorian to latch on to. His youth's only going to last a little while. He can do anything when he's young. He's going to get old and lose all of that opportunity that comes with youth. And this is absolutely true. I think we can see that, in our own lives. Like I'm 42. I look good now to my 60-something-year-old self years later. But we're never happy with ourselves in the moment because we look back on an earlier version of ourselves and like, oh my God, I was better. Like, Seniors, you guys are almost at the peak of your physical perfection. You're a Dorian Gray. Like, you got 5 more years and